Hi, my name's Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing interviewing narcissists and psychopaths. Before we begin, though, I'll very briefly run through the main traits of narcissism and psychopathy. I have covered these subjects in previous videos in a bit more depth, and I will include the link to those in the video description if you want to watch them too. Narcissistic personality disorder is a mental condition in which people have a hugely inflated sense of their own self-importance. They have a deep need for excessive attention and admiration from others. They normally have troubled relationships and they have a lack of empathy towards other people. However, behind that mask of extreme confidence, there's a very fragile self-esteem that's quite vulnerable to even the slightest amount of criticism. A narcissistic personality disorder causes problems in many areas of a person's life, such as obviously relationships, work, school, or even financial affairs. People with narcissistic personality disorder might be generally unhappy and generally disappointed when they're not given the special attention or the special favours or admiration that they entirely believe that they deserve. They might find their relationships unfulfilling, and others might not actually enjoy being around them because it's all about the narcissist. Those who have narcissistic personality disorder are in love with an idealised, grandiose image of themselves. They're in love with this inflated self-image because it allows them then to avoid any deep feelings of insecurity. Narcissists will use various tactics to support their inflated ego and sense of entitlement. And it's this need to prop themselves up that brings about the negative behaviours. Moving on to psychopaths then. Psychopaths clearly display extreme behaviours which do lend themselves very well to criminality. We know that the most common understanding of a psychopath is somebody who is very skilled at lying, very skilled at manipulating other people, and has very little empathy and feels little remorse for their actions. Although psychopaths can come across as being very charming people, they are at ease manipulating other people around them to get what they want. Psychopaths have very extreme ways of dealing with others. However, their general behaviour isn't actually all that bizarre in everyday settings. They can interact with and manipulate others, and so can clearly fit in with society and not be noticed. Psychopaths are defined as individuals who have absolutely no concern for the feelings of others. They have a complete disregard of any sense of social obligation, and they have an inability to form any lasting emotional ties with people. When psychopaths do turn to criminality, they tend to use charm and manipulation to coerce their victims into getting what they want. They might even use that charm to gain the trust of the person or the potential victim. They're characterised as selfish and remorseless individuals who use others for their own selfish needs and desires. They often have quite impulsive behaviour and they have a chronically unstable and antisocial lifestyle. Most psychopaths will have the narcissistic traits as well. However, the main difference is that the narcissist needs other people's attention and praise to make themselves feel good. It's almost as if they feed off the attention of others and they feed off the control that they have over other people. Hiding behind this sense of grandiose, though, as I mentioned, is a vulnerable, fragile self-esteem that can easily be hurt. However, when it comes to psychopaths feed themselves this praise and adoration and attention, and those around them are meaningless unless the psychopath wants something from them. These traits mean that different interview techniques could be of use to get the most information out of them. If you were going to be chatting to a narcissist and you happen to mention that you liked skiing, for example, they'll interrupt you and tell you how great a skier they were, or how fast they can go, or how many dangerous tracks that they've skied in. If you were talking about cooking dinner, for example, later that day, the narcissist would again interrupt and tell you the best way to cook that meal would be X, Y, or Z. They'll also tell you about all of the fantastic dishes that they've cooked and maybe the praise that was given to them by other people because of that. In short, a narcissist will tell you that they're bigger and better than everybody else around them. If you were talking to or interviewing a narcissist and wanted to get some information from them, you have to admire them. You have to give them lots of positive feedback. In fact, with narcissists, they're more than willing to talk endlessly about themselves. And so even if you just sit there and look interested and look like you're listening, they will keep on talking. Narcissists are very comfortable lying, and they don't feel guilt for that. They feel that they're completely justified in acting in the ways that they do. If you needed, for example, some information from a narcissist, you might be able to offer them something which is of value to them. However, you should be very careful to never give them what you're offering them in exchange for the information, because if they think that they can just take whatever it is that you're offering, they won't even give a second thought about not keeping up their side of the bargain and giving you the information. The thing that matters most to a narcissist is being seen as bigger and better than everybody else. If they believe something will hurt their reputation, they'll probably think twice. Everything in their world is quid pro quo. You have to do something for them if you want them to do something for you. They'll rarely be offended by people looking out for themselves and offering something in exchange for something from the narcissist. If you are trying to get some information from a narcissist, you want to be asking probing questions. If you ask anything, without offering anything else in return, they're not likely to be very forthcoming. However, if you ask what other people might think of the fact that they could have helped in an inquiry and they didn't, they're more likely to comply and give you that information than if you told them that they should simply give you the information. Narcissists are much more likely to act on ideas that they think they thought up themselves. So when you're talking to them, you want to emphasize community, and you want to use disappointment rather than anger to keep them in line and to keep them doing what you want them to do. They want to look good, so help them to look good by telling them to do good, to be seen as good. One of the most important things to remember when you're interviewing or even talking to a narcissist is that you should avoid telling them that they aren't as good as they think they are. You should probably avoid telling them that they're a narcissist too. That's likely to result in very volatile behaviour and anger. It'd be almost like shaking up a bottle of fizzy pop and unscrewing the lid. And this is generally known as narcissistic injury. They'll do anything to protect themselves from being called out or seen as less than they claim to be. An interview or a conversation with a psychopath is likely to be slightly different. A psychopath would want to lead the conversation in the way that they want. Psychopaths can be very charming, and they use that charm to disarm people and to manipulate them in a variety of ways. They're often very nice and charming, easy to chat with, but it's this ability to disarm people that can easily skew a conversation or an interview to go how the psychopath wants it to go. If they perceive that their charm isn't working, it'll very quickly vanish. It's then replaced with a more aggressive or abrasive approach. When this occurs, this display of aggression is likely to lead an interviewer to be harsh or scolding towards them, but that's not likely to be very helpful to getting information from the psychopath. It'll simply lead to more aggression from the psychopath and a shutting down with no more information shared from them. Psychopaths seek or create exciting or risky situations that put them on the edge. Therefore, they're likely to be very calm and at ease during a police interview, for example. Their need for stimulation and proneness to boredom means that psychopaths can often become disinterested, distracted, or disconnected during interviews. Changing the way that questions are asked or using other information such as pictures or documents or a second interviewer will go some way into helping. Because of a psychopath's inflated sense of self-worth and importance, interviewers should anticipate that the psychopath will feel superior to them. The arrogance of a psychopath will lead them to enjoy any act of back and forth questioning, viewing it as a pleasurable game of cat and mouse. Most psychopaths are pathological liars, and they'll simply lie for the sake of it. They'll lie about anything, even if it's issues that are insignificant to the matter at hand. They never feel any guilt or shame for the lies that they tell. However, if their lies are challenged, they're not likely to give any further information. The best kinds of strategies are to keep them talking so that any inconsistencies keep on arising and mounting up. Their arrogance and their impulsive nature results in bragging, preaching, trying to make an impression, or simply just showing off. And this is when they slip up and provide information about themselves and about their crimes, and as I said, provide inconsistencies. Finally, psychopaths will hijack an interview, and they'll bring up topics that aren't relevant to the conversation. They'll give the interviewer the information that the psychopath wants to give. They'll answer questions with answers that weren't even asked. When an interviewer is trying to bring the conversation back on topic, there can be multiple flare-ups from the psychopath. I once heard David Wilson describe interviewing a psychopath as something like putting out 100 tiny little fires. I will put a link to that video in the description of David Wilson interviewing Arthur Shawcross. It's a brilliant example of these volatile twists and turns that psychopaths create. But David Wilson does a really good job of keeping the interview in the direction that he wanted it to go. It ultimately ended up with Arthur Shawcross storming off because he wasn't prepared to answer any more questions. When the psychopath can no longer control the way that the interview or the conversation is going, they simply shut down. I will also leave a link in the description of Piers Morgan interviewing a psychopath. Piers Morgan is undoubtedly a very skilled journalist. However, I don't think that he was properly coached or trained on how to interview a psychopath. Piers Morgan is a fairly aggressive interviewer anyway, so when he uses this technique on a psychopath, there's a complete shutdown of information. At the end of the interview, Piers Morgan continues to shout aggressively and to try to dominate the psychopath, which ends up in a total shutdown with no further information gathered. He also did an interview with Paris Hilton. Paris takes time to reflect on the questions and he pauses deliberately before answering. Paris also allows the interview to be guided by Piers. However, he very carefully answers the questions in a way that would benefit a parole hearing. I will leave that link to that video in the description as well. I do hope that you found this video interesting and, more importantly, that you've learned something new. Thanks for watching then. Bye for now.